All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Share to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Steve and Teri Czinn, for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month in memory of Steve's father, Bunim, Tzvi ben Chaim, Leah Sol, zechus refuah Yitzchak for her daughter Ilana, Bas Esther, and for all of those wounded in Eretz Yisroel. Yonason Rachel Wolff for a complete and lasting refuah sheleimah for Refuel Yitzchak Baruch ben Esther, Jerry and Sora Wolasky in the zechus refuah sheleimah for their grandson Zecharya Dov and Perel Shira, and Azriel and Iris Miller in the zechus of the holy soldiers of the IDF, and the merit of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisroel. And of course, we have dedicated maseches Bava Kamma in memory and the neshama Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michael Harush, valiant police officer killed in the firefight by the police station in sderot. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, his neshama will have an aliya and his family a neshama. With that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, we have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Yud Aleph 11, and we are picking up in Eretz Hashem. We actually left off Minahani Mili, second wide line, 10b. So if you remember again, this goes quickly actually, because it's actually just the drasha of three separate psukim. Remember again, we left off with a really fascinating halacha, which is my ox goes ahead and injures Reuven's ox, or I injure Reuven's ox, or Reuven's ox falls into my pit, or is the damage is not, the type of damage is not really what's important. What's important is I damaged Reuven's ox. Somehow through me, Reuven's ox was damaged. So now I have an obligation, obviously, to go ahead and pay back Reuven. So we'll say, so the shaila is the carcass itself is worth money. It's worth money. So halacha l'maisa, so who, so to speak, gets the carcass? Who gets the carcass? In other words, is it the mazik? The mazik gets the carcass, he sells it off ultimately again, then pays back the nizak, or the nizak goes ahead and gets the carcass, the damaged party, and then the damager is obligated to pay back the difference between whatever value the carcass could bring in and the rest. So I will say, so what came out of yesterday's daf is that halacha l'maisa, it is the damaged party that goes ahead and deals with the carcass, retrieves whatever money they can from the carcass, and then the damager pays the difference. Interesting halacha. So the Gemara says, from where do we know that? So the Gemara says, Am Yisroel. So we're going to have now three different psukim. So Am Yisroel to Amar Kra, Makin nefesh behema yishal meno. So I'll say the pasuk says, if you go ahead, Makin nefesh behema, if a person goes ahead and literally kills an animal, yishal mena, ultimately you have to pay. Al tikri yishal mena ella yashli mena. So don't read it ultimately simply as pay, but rather read it as complete. Complete. Yashli mena. So complete whatever is owed. What does it mean complete? So in other words, the damaged party will take the carcass, sell off the carcass, retrieve whatever funds they can from that, and then ultimately, again, the damager is obligated to go ahead and then make the damaged party whole for the rest of the damages. Rav Kahana says from here, Im tarof itaref ivi'io eidat treifa lo yishali. So Rabbi says this is actually interesting. So this is actually talking about a shomer. We're going to get more in depth in each of these psukim on Yud Aleph and Aleph on 11a. But here the pasuk says, if I'm a shomer and I'm watching an animal, right? And now let's say again a predatory animal comes and just kills the animal that I'm watching. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says that at the end of the day, a shomer is pater on own sin, on extenuating circumstances. So what I have to do, if I'm the shomer, I have to prove that there was an extenuating circumstance. So the Gemara says, Eid ad treifa yishalim, treifa atzmalo yisham. So what do you see from here? That the damager has to pay up to the value of the treifa. It doesn't literally mean that. In other words, it means that he pays whatever damages he has to pay, but included in those damages ultimately is the value of the treifa itself. Chizkiah says from here, V'hameis yeh lo. So we'll say the pasuk says the dead animal will be his. For who? Who's the his? L'niza, to the damaged party. So the damaged party keeps the carcass. That's worth X, whatever it's worth, and then the damager is obligated to pay any additional amount above that in order to make the damaged party whole. Ultimately, again, the mace will belong to him. L'nizak, to the damaged party. You might have thought, how do you know sin is like maybe it's the mazik? Amrit lo kach haya. So we say, is it not that way? What does that mean? My lo kach haya. Amr Abai, listen to this. Isa adaytcha nevela de mazik havya lichtov rachmana shar tachas shar v'lishtov. But we'll say if the nevela, if the carcass of the animal was the property of the damager, right? Okay, if that's how it worked, then in other words, my shar kills Ruvain's shar. So if the halacha was, I, the damager, get the carcass, right? And it is now my obligation to go ahead and sell off the carcass, retrieve whatever funds I can, and then again, above and beyond that, I have to pay the damaged party. If that was the case, Torah should have just said, shar, tachas, shar. You kill an ox, you give another ox instead of it. The Gemara says, Hames hiya lo lamali. Why do I need that extra phrase of v'hames hiya lo? And the carcass will belong to him. Shmamina l'nizak. Ultimately, again, you see from here that what? That Allah l'maisa, the carcass becomes the property, or not the property, the carcass really is put in the possession of the nizak, the damaged party. Shabbos is just to show you how this works. So therefore, my ox kills Ruvain's ox. So now, obviously, I'm obligated. But there's a couple of steps over here. Step number one is that the damaged party has got to take the carcass, go ahead, sell it off, try to recapture whatever funds you can capture from the carcass. After that amount is established, I, the damager, now have an obligation to pay the rest of the amount, ultimately, again, for replacement value. So fascinating halacha. So that's all this is. So we'll say, point over here is we have three different psukim. So here's what's interesting. This is one of these machloksim where everyone is agreeing on the result, right? The result is that halacha l'maisa, the carcass of the animal, ultimately again belongs to the nizak. The nizak is obligated to go ahead and sell it off. Recapture whatever funds he can recapture from the carcass, and then the mazik, the damager, is obligated to pay the rest. So the shayla, but now again, it's just machlokes what the source is. So the Gemara says, well, why do you need all the sources? The Gemara says you need them all. Why? Because of Rachmana Make Behema Yishalmena. If the Torah would have just said, if you kill an animal, you have to pay. Mishum dolo shchicha. Because I will say, it's not so common, ultimately, again, that a person is mazik an animal. That's not a common case. So maybe because that's not a common case, therefore, halacha l'maisa, that's where it's on the nizak to go ahead and take care of the carcass. Aval treifa, but ultimately, again, the animal being killed by another animal, that's a common case, the shchicha. Emelo, I'm at a thought maybe the obligation to deal with the carcass is on the mazik. So the Gemara says, therefore, tzvicha. V'yashma in a treifa. And if we just said the case of treifa, we shouldn't do a mela. So we'll say treifa ultimately, again, is something that happens beyond your control. So maybe that's the case where it's on the nizak, the damaged party, to go ahead and take care of the carcass. Aval makeh behema, to be adayim, but in the case of where I injure an animal, that ultimately, again, that is going to be biadayim. That's active injury. Emolo, ultimately, again, maybe not. To which the Gemara says, hani tarti mishum delo shchicha. Or perhaps I would have thought about these two because they're not common. V'hamishum d'mamela, aval v'hamesi hiyelo the shchicha biadayim. I will say, but halacha ma'is in the case of hamesi hiyelo, which is shor tachas shor b'hamesi hiyelo. So the Gemara says that that's common and it's active activity. Emolo, I might have thought that halacha l'maisa, the mazik has to take care of the nevela. So the Gemara says, "V'yashmo inan hamesi yalo mishun debamona kamazik." Furthermore, again, in the case of hamesi yalo, it's my shar damaging another shar. Aval hacha debegufa mazik, but over here, where I'm damaging another shar, emolo, I might have thought that maybe it's on the mazik to take care of the nevela. Therefore, tzvicha. So we'll say. So bottom line, each of the psukim mentioned has their own unique peculiarity or halachic nuance. And therefore, again, had you only stated one, perhaps I could have inferred some type of erroneous inference from the others or from the omission of the others. Therefore, again, now that we kind of have this conglomerate of psukim, one thing is clear, which is that halacha l'maisa, when my ox kills Ruvain's ox, or I kill Ruvain's ox, or I'm the shomer, something happens to Ruvain's ox. And now again, whenever situation that I have an obligation to make Ruvain whole, because his ox was killed, halacha l'maisa, it is on Ruvain, the damaged party, to take care of the nevela, sell off the nevela. Once we identify the amount of funds, right, recaptured from the nevela, then I, the damager, have to pay the rest in order to make Reuven the damaged party whole. That's the halacha, I will say. Now that we've established that, let's go right there. So the Gemara says, now, both say the whole reason this is true is because the pasuk says the mace, right? Ultimately, again, the carcass will belong to him being the damaged party. Halav hachi, were that not the case, have amina nevela demazik havya. I would have thought that the nevela belongs to the mazik. Rabbi say, apparently, without these psukim, here's what I would have thought. I would have thought like this. I go ahead. Let's just keep a simple case. I go ahead and my shar kills Reuven's shar. So the pasuk says, no problem. Shar tachashar v'ameis yihiyeh. Shar tachashar. So if it would have just said that, I would have thought, how do damages work? My ox killed Reuven's ox. So I say, what do I owe Reuven? What do I owe Reuven? A new ox. That's it. I owe him a new ox. Now the pasuk says, v'hameis yihiyeh lo. The carcass will belong to him. The Gemara understands that pasuk means what, or that phrase means what? That the nizak, the damaged party, keeps the dead ox, sells it off, recaptures funds, and I'm obligated for the rest of the repayment. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Hashta, I isle ledidei kama trefus yohevlei davar mar yoshev l'rabo shava kesef afilu subin didei mi boy. So we'll say, listen to this. I'll give you, of course the carcass belongs to the damaged party. Of course it does. I was going to say, give you an extreme case. We'll say, if halacha l'maisa, right, my ox kills Reuven's ox, right? So let's say now I owe Reuven $1,000. It happens to be, I have a lot of ox carcasses. Whatever, don't ask. Just whatever. I'm a shochet, I had a lot of nevelas, whatever it might be. So I can pay Reuven in ox carcasses. But as well say, because the Gemara Darshan is over here, Yoshev, you have to repay. Remember, we're going to talk about this much more. When it comes to repayment, as long as I am paying with an item of value, even if it's a quote-unquote inferior item, halacha l'maisa, that works. So in other words, technically speaking, I could pay Reuven the entire amount I owe him. I could pay him in carcasses. I could pay him in bran. I could pay him whatever I want. So if I'm allowed to pay in carcasses, of course, Reuven himself, the damaged party, keeps the carcass, disposes of it, recaptures whatever funds he can, and then moves on from there. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, fine, actually, not yet. So Gemara says, you're right. Here we go, it's incredible. Ella, lefachos nevela. So I will say, what are we really focusing on over here? The fact that the damaged party keeps the carcass, right, and then has to use that. In other words, that carcass has a value, and that value goes towards repayment. So that's correct. We'll say, what are we focused on now? Carcass depreciation. We'll say, so who bears the loss for carcass depreciation? So watch this. The Gemara says, so pet masol Rashi for just a moment. Second to last line in Rashi. El bechas nevela dehachi amrachmana demishas misa kai b'shusei denizak. They will say, here's really what the halacha is coming to convey. The halacha is coming to convey the following. The halacha is going to say this: the fact that the carcass belongs to the damaged party, that everyone agrees with. We'll say what's fascinating is as follows. The way this works, let me say this outside, they don't see it in Rashi. The way this works is like this. My ox kills Reuven's ox. Okay. Now what's the halacha? But shar tachashar. I have to give him another ox. Okay, how does that work? Step one, let's take a look at the carcass. The carcass has a value. And I will say, here's what's interesting. The value of the carcass is established at the moment of death. And that amount is locked in. So that is the value of the carcass. So the goal now is, nizak, damaged party, get to work, sell off that carcass. Let's say the nizak, just whatever, he's got other stuff going on. So Reuven, right, the damaged party, so he doesn't sell it for another 2 days. Well, obviously, 2 days later, the carcass is worth less. Is worth less. Who bears that loss? That's on the nizak. That's on the damaged party. So we'll say, so that's the chap over here, and this is really incredible. So not only halacha, this is fascinating. So again, we do two things over here. Number one, the actual carcass becomes the property of the nizak, of the damaged party, right? That's aleph. And beis, the value of the carcass is locked in at the time of death. And again, any depreciation is borne by the nizak, by the damaged party. Incredible. So the Gemara says, so we just said Rashi. So the Gemara says, Leima. Actually, just take a look. Ela Pechas Rashi says, Dahachi Amar Rachmana, the Mishas Misa Kai B'Shusei Nizak. At the time of death of the carcass, it is established in the rishus of the nizak. V'misriach upich sadamim, and therefore, if it decays and therefore becomes and has diminished value, Mishas Misa V'Shas Ha'amad B'Din. Psida de nizaku or mishalim mazik masha nezek yes heavy yeser aladam shaisan avela shabishas misa. So we'll say this is incredible. So there is a value locked in at the time of death. Obviously, that's presupposing that the nevela was assessed, not appraised. So assuming it was appraised at the time of death, then halach l'maisa that amount is locked in. Any amount of depreciation from there ultimately is on the nizak. Incredible. It says the Gemara lema pachas nevela tanahi. Maybe this is a machlokes sama pachas nevela. The Sanya, listen to this. Im tarof yitraf yivi. So we'll say, so the pasuk over here said this is talking about a shomer, right? Im tarof yitaref yivi eoei that treifa lo yishalim. So we'll say this is about a shomer that Allah l'maisa again is a shomer sacha, right? A paid custodian. He's watching an animal, and the animal is killed by another animal. That's an ones. Shomer Sachar is a paid custodian, is pater on own sin. But he's got to bring a proof that it really was an ones. He's got to bring a proof to what exactly happened. So the Gemara says, so top of Yud Aleph, Yavi Eidim Shnitrafa Ba'ones Upater. His job is to go ahead and bring witnesses that the animal was killed in a way that was an extenuating circumstance, and he'll be pater. We'll say that's the way it works. Rashi says over here, Tab Rashi, the Shomer Sachar Pater Ba'onsin Kivichsiv Bei, Umeis Onishbar, Onishba Inra, Shvuas Hashem Tia Ben Shneim. So we'll say, so that's Talocha. That's Talocha, right? You have a Shomer Sachar, so that Talocha is Shomer Sachar ultimately again brings a raya, brings proof that it was an extenuating circumstance, and he is Pater. Abba Shalom says, no. That's not what the Pasuk is saying. The Pasuk is saying something different. Yavi Iduda Lebezdin. Abba Shol says that the halacha is that when the animal is killed, they have to bring the iduda. Rashi's iduda is the nevela. They have to go ahead and bring the carcass to Beis Din. Now, why are you bringing the carcass to Beis Din? Abba say ultimately for assessment. Bring the carcass to Beis Din immediately. Let Beis Din assess the value of the carcass. So the Gemara says, "My love, what are they arguing about?" So maybe they're arguing about the following things, right? One opinion holds that halacha l'maisa, the diminution in the value of the nevela is on the nizak, is on the damaged party. Umar savar the mazik, and the other opinion says no, it's borne by the mazik, the damager. To which the Gemara says low, the chuli alma the nizak. I will say everyone agrees that ultimately, again, diminution in the value of the nevela, depreciation of the nevela, is on the damaged party. So we'll say there are two things now that the Gemara has established, right? What are the two things? Number one, when my ox kills Ruvain's ox, right? The value of the nevela is counted towards repayment. In other words, we'll say it's important to understand when my ox kills Ruvain's ox, Ruvain hasn't suffered a total loss. Right? He hasn't suffered a total loss. Right? He suffered some amount of loss, but that loss is offset by the value of the nevela. So everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, the damaged party has the obligation to go ahead and sell off the nevela and recapture the funds. Now Rabbi say there's something else over here that's happening, which is what? How are we establishing value? So the answer is value is established immediately at the time of death. Now, obviously, we need a Beis Din to assess the value, right? So obviously, again, what's going to happen over here is it's going to be on the nizak, the damaged party, to get that nevela to Beis Din or to bring a Beis Din to the nevela, assess the value, and once that value is assessed at time of death, that value is locked in. And therefore, I will say, from that point on, any amount of depreciation is borne by the nizak, the damaged party. So I, as the damager, know exactly what my obligation is, right? We'll say, what's my obligation? My obligation is the value of a new shore minus the locked-in value of the shore carcass. Right? Irrelevant of what happens to the value subsequent. In other words, we'll say at this point in time, so therefore, if Ruvain, the damaged party, takes his time in selling off the carcass and doesn't get around to it to another week and a half, that's his promise, not mine. My obligation is fixed. So as I started arguing about over here, this is incredible. So it's fascinating. B'torach nevela kamifligi. Well, so what are they arguing about? Who has to schlep the nevela? In other words, we'll say, remember again, the pashtos, Beis Din is not coming out to the nevela. The nevela's got to make it to Beis Din. So we'll say, who has the obligation of transportation obligation over here, right? Who has the obligation to get the nevela ultimately to Beis Din? That's going to be the shayla over here. Upon whom does that obligation fall? So the Gemara says, Vatanya, Achirim Omrim Minayin Shal Bal Habar Lahalo Sharmi Boro. So but we learned that if, let's say again, Ruvain's shar falls into my bar, Ruvain's shar falls into my pit and dies. So we'll say, how do we know that the obligation is upon the Balabar, the owner of the pit, to hoist the nevela out of the pit? Talmud Lomar, Kesef Yoshiv LeBa'alov V'Hames. So we'll say, it's actually fascinating. It's a different way to read this pasuk. The Torah says, Balabar Yishan Kesef Yoshiv LeBa'alov V'Hames. So the owner of the pit has to pay back the value of the shar to the owner of the shar, V'Hames. So it's putting a comma in a different place. It's saying V'Hames is attached to the phrase that says Yoshiv. The same way that the owner of the pit has to return money to the owner of the shar, he also has to return the carcass. So the obligation to go ahead and get the carcass out of the pit is on the Bal Habar. We'll talk about that. So Torah nevela hechidami. So when we talk about over here, the obligation to go ahead and transport the nevela. What's the case? Now watch this. So if we say, look, a carcass in the pit is worth 1 zuz, and a carcass out of the pit is worth 4 zuz. So obviously, again, who's going to go ahead and take the time and effort to hoist the nevela out? Ki tarach, the dinafshe tarach. They both say it's on the nizak, right? Because remember, again, the nizak has the vested interest in ultimately, again, getting that out of there. So the Gemara says, Kitar Amalei, lo tzricha, tebebira shav yezuza, va'aguda nami shav yezuza. We'll say the truth is, halacha l'maisa. At the end of the day, we could be talking about a carcass that is worth the same amount of money in the pit and out of the pit. The Gemara says, how could that be? We'll say, could a carcass have the same value in the pit or out of the pit? In the ha'amri inshi kishura b'masa bezuza kishura b'dara bezuza. We'll say a beam in the city is worth a zuz, and a beam in the desert is worth a zuz. We'll say, what does this mean? Sometimes you could sell an item for value, and if a person needs it enough, they don't care that they have to retrieve it from somewhere else. Right? So sometimes an item itself could have an inherent value, even though there is an element of retrieval that this purchaser is going to have to do. Okay, so we'll say, so bottom line, here's what we have. So halacha l'maisa, my ox damages Reuben's ox, or like I said, the manner of damage is really irrelevant. The point over here is whatever it is I damage, whether myself, my animal, my pit, Reuben's ox is dead. I now have an obligation to go ahead and make Reuben whole. There are 2 parts to making Reuben whole. Number 1, Reuben has to go ahead and sell off the carcass. It's on the nizak. So Reuben has to sell off the carcass, recapture those funds. I owe him any additional amounts of money in order to go ahead and get him to the value of a new ox. But halacha l'maisa, that obligation to sell off the carcass is on Reuben. Not only that, the value of the carcass is established at the time of death. That's the value that's locked in, and now I, the damager, know exactly what my financial obligation is in terms of creating or in terms of restoring to Reuben a new ox. Any subsequent depreciation ultimately is borne by Reuben, the damaged party. Incredible. Amr Shmuel says, Ein shaman lo leganav v'lo legazlan elu nizakim. Shmuel says, in general, we do not create a valuation process for a ganav or for a gazlan, rather only for damage. Now, what does this mean? Let's say the following situation, right? I stole a shar from Ruvain, right? I stole a shar from Ruvain, and then what happened? Actually, take a look at Rashi. Am Yisroel, let's look at this. Minad dayanu she'in shaman lo leganav v'lo legazlan shem ganav v'gazal behema okelim v'nifchesu etzlo. Ein shaman hanavela v'habesarim v'ashvarim lebailim sheyachzor ganav v'apachas eli shalom mekem. So listen to this. I steal. Imagine the following situation. I steal an ox from Ruvain. Then what happens? The ox dies. So now there isn't a vela, right? There is a carcass. So you might have thought like this: Beis Din should go ahead and evaluate the carcass, right? And again, Ruvain, the quote unquote damaged party, he should get the carcass, sell off the carcass, and I, the ganav, should have to pay the rest. To which Shmuel says, no, we don't do that. If you steal, your obligation is just simply to furnish the victim with a brand new ox. We're not getting involved in valuations. We're not getting involved in carcasses. Again, you the ganav, you could sell off the carcass. Definitely take care of the carcass yourself. But Beis Din is not getting involved in that. If you stole something and then something happens to the object, if you steal something and the object is whole, just return the object. But if you stole something and the object is compromised, Beis Din is not getting involved in valuations. You are just obligated to furnish the victim with a new object. Incredible. Vani Omer, Shmuel says, Vani Omer, Af l'shoel, va'abba modali. I say this also applies to a shoel, and Abba is Rav, also agrees with me. So we'll say, the Gemara asks on our last name in the Bailu, what is exactly Shmuel saying? Haki kamar, Af l'shoel, shoel, va'abba modali? Is he saying that a shoel, a borrower, is treated like Nezikin, and therefore by a shoel we will evaluate, we will take the time to evaluate the carcass, and Rav agrees with that? O Dilma Haki kamar, Vani Omer Af l'shol ein shamin va'aba modli. Or is he saying, no, that even for a borrower, it will say if somebody borrows an object and the object dies in his domain, we won't evaluate the carcass. And Allah Maisa, the borrower is obligated to make the principal whole with a brand new animal. And Rav agrees with that. So which one is he saying? Tashma, listen to this. Dahu Gavra, the Shol Narga Mechavre. There was a guy who borrowed an axe from his friend. Right, so Ruvain borrowed an axe from Shimon. Tavra, the axe broke. So Asla Kamei Rav. So again, the borrower came before Rav. Amalei Zil Shlimle Nagra Ma'aliya. Go pay him back give him a new axe. Give him a new axe. So we'll say, what do you see from there? Shmamina in Shaman. What do you see from there? You see what happened but there's a broken axe. We'll say broken axe has value also, but you see that the value of the broken axe is not even discussed over here. So you see from here that what? We don't evaluate the object outside of the case of damages. It's only in Nezikin. In every other case, if you have an object and it breaks or damages something else, you're obligated to just provide the owner with a brand new object. So that's what you see from here. Adrabah, I can say just the opposite. So afterwards, Rav Kana and Rav Asi said to Rav, Dina Hachi, is that really the halacha? B'shasik, and Rav was silent. Now, it's interesting how they interpret Rav's silence as disagreement. Fascinating, right? That Rav disagreed with the previous psak halacha, right? Meaning what? That Rav would have said, no, you do count the broken axe. Let's evaluate the broken axe. Let's evaluate the broken axe and use that towards repayment. Shmamina shaman. You see from here that halacha l'maisa, we would go ahead and evaluate the object in the case of a shoal as well. Itmar amar ula, amar belazar, shaman laganav ula gazlan. Wow. But listen to this. So here, Ula says in Rabbi Lazar that even in the case of a thief, right, a ganav or a gazlan, we will go ahead and evaluate the item. So also what that means is like this, that Allah Chalamaysa, I steal an ox from Ruvain, the ox dies, Beis Din will evaluate the carcass. Say the carcass is worth X. That valuation, that amount could go towards the repayment of the theft, and I, the thief, am only obligated for the rest of the amount. Incredible. Rapapi Amar Ein Shaman. Rapapi says, no, we do not do that for a ganav. Gazav Hilchasa, Ein Shaman Lo Leganav V'Lo Legazlon. Aval shoel shamin. So I'll say the halacha l'maisa is we do not valuate items for a ganav or for a gazlan, but for a shol, for a borrower, we will. Kidrav kana Ravasi, as Rav Kana Ravasi says. So we'll say, and halacha l'maisa, that is indeed the halacha l'maisa. So I will say, so if we pause here just a moment, here's what we have, and this is really incredible. Number one, let's just review all of the halachas we have. Number one, when ultimately again either myself, my shar, my bar damages Ruvain's shar, and Ruvain's shar is dead. The halacha is I'm obligated. Why am I obligated? Shar tachas shar, replacement. But part of that repayment is the carcass. Who has the obligation to dispose and recapture the funds from the carcass? The nizak, damaged party. Furthermore, Bezin gets involved. Shaman, Bezin will evaluate the carcass at the time of death, and that's the value that's locked in. So if there is any other subsequent appreciation, that is borne by the damaged party. Where do we apply this concept of shaman, of valuation of carcass or broken items? So apparently, again, we'll apply it in the zikin and by a shoel, by a borrower. Where don't we apply it? By a ganav and a gazal. So if you steal something, and then let's say the object dies, Bezin is not getting involved in valuating any carcasses. Rather, the halacha is if you stole something, and then again, if the object is extant, then just return it. But if it's not, then halacha l'maisa, you are obligated to furnish the victim with a brand new object. Incredible. What says Galati? So now the Gemara is going to quote a whole bunch of random halachas, really fascinating, but random halachas in the name of Ula. Since we were quoting Ula before, we'll continue to quote Ula now. So here we go. So let's say this. A woman begins to give birth and a placenta emerges. And I will say, there's a concept in halacha of ein shilya below vlad. Wherever there's a placenta, there's a baby. There's a baby. And I will say, and I remember again, once the baby is born, part of the baby is born being exits the mother, ultimately again, there's tumas leila, right? There's ultimately ritual impurity from birth. Again, depending if it's a boy, if it's a girl. So watch the case over here. So what happens if a woman has a prolonged birth? I will say, and now again, this is a case where we'll see there's no baby. All there is a placenta. In a case like that, we assume there was a baby, but whatever fetal matter there was dissolved. So the Gemara says, but let's say in this case over here, part of the placenta came out on Monday, and part of it came out on Tuesday. So the Gemara says, Monin la min harishon. We count her days of tumah, ultimately again from the first day, the day in which the placenta initially emerged. Amalei Rava. So Rava said, "My daitech. Why you count it from the first day? L'chumra. Chumra da asli de kulahu." We'll say 1 second. It might be a chumra now to start tumah early, but if you start counting earlier, we'll say, what does that mean? It also ends early. But she may still have an additional day of tumah because remember again, the shulya, the placenta, partially came out the first day and then the second day. So the Gemara says, the kam taharas de mirishon ela amarava. You're right. Lochush chosheshes. They both say from the first day that the placenta emerges, where we have to be concerned that there was a birth that occurred in that day. So both say salach l'maisa chosheshes. What do you mean chosheshes? That Allah l'maisa, if she touches any taras on day number 1, they will become tamei. Mimna lo mimni el l'shem. But halacha l'maisa, we'll only go ahead and count the days of tumah from ultimately again the second day, the day in which the rest of the placenta emerged. There was if you just take a quick look at Rashi shilya sheyatzasa, it's the second to last short line. The kaimalan hamapeles shalya shiyosheves ala yimei tuma b'mei tara shein shalya below vlad elishnuma b'socha. So we'll say if a woman expels a placenta, so I'll say right, she births a placenta, even though we can't find a baby in that placenta, the halacha assumes that there is a birth. Because there's no such thing as a placenta without a baby. So what happened to the baby? The fetal matter dissolved within the placenta. So therefore, Rabbi says, in that case, where the placenta partially comes out day 1 and then day 2, from day 1 already will be choshesh, that if she touches any taras, they're going to become tamei, but the actual count of yemei tumah will only begin as of day 2. So what is coming to teach me? They mix a shir below vlad. Coming to teach you that there's no such thing as a placenta without a baby. So the Gemara says, we already learned that. So we'll say this is not talking about by an animal. Right? We'll say that there's an interesting halacha. The halacha is like this. If you go ahead and you shecht an animal and you find a baby, right, inside that animal, that baby is mutter without shechita, called a ben pakua. bet pakua. We learned in the chulin. Bet pakua. Now, here's what's interesting. What happens if you're about to slaughter an animal and the animal is in the midst of giving birth? So part of the placenta emerged from the animal at the time you shecht the animal, time the animal is shechted. So what's the halacha? Asura b'achila. So we'll say, so again, once that part of the placenta comes out, that baby is considered, the offspring is considered birthed, and therefore again, it is not mutter through the shchita of the mother. Why? The Gemara says, asura b'achila, simin vlad b'isha, simin vlad b'behema. So we'll see, we've already learned that the emergence of a placenta is representative of a birth. So what is this coming to teach me? Imamas nisin, so we'll say again, had you gone ahead and learned it out from this Mishnah, I would have thought, we'll say, Amabez, the yesh mikzas shilya below vlad. I would have thought, maybe not. Maybe we'll say, it is possible that when there is a partial emergence of a placenta, it is possible that is without a fetus, without a baby. Ugzira mikzasa atakula, and maybe the only reason we prohibit a partial placenta is lest you come to confuse it with a complete placenta. So Kamash Malana will say, no, that the halacha always holds that wherever there is a placenta, there is always a baby along with that placenta. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, in all of these cases, so in the case of the woman who partially delivers the placenta on day 1, day 2, already from day 1, any taras she touches will become tamei, but the actual count will be as day 2. For an animal, if an animal partially births the placenta at the time of shechita, the subsequent offspring that comes out of that animal will need its own independent shechita. Okay, like I said, absolutely nothing to do with our sugya. Just only common denominator is that it's ula. We're just quoting a whole bunch of great halachas from ula. V'amar ula, another one. What's like 11b, second line down. V'amar ula, amar belazar, the charshin nishrach b'sok lamid yom. So what's an interesting case? This is talking about a child, a human child, a bechar. So we'll say, so remember again, there's a halacha, ultimately a pidyon aben. What happens if halacha l'maisa, the baby dies within 30 days? What's the halacha? Ein podin oso. Ultimately, there's no pidyon aben. No pidyon aben. There was an interesting, Rashi points out over here that halacha l'maisa, obviously if the baby died on its own, there's no pidyon aben. What happens if the baby didn't die on its own? The baby was killed. So you might have thought that since this was a baby that was capable of surviving past 30 days, maybe even though now it's not alive, maybe there should be a pidyon aben, since technically speaking it was a life that was capable of going past 30 days. So the Gemara says, halacha l'maisa, no. If the child unfortunately did not live past 30 days, whether it died on its own or it was killed, halacha l'maisa, there is no pidyon aben. B'chin Rabbi Shmuel Silber, mitoch shen emar pado tifta, since the Torah used the double lashon of pado tifta, which literally means redeem it. You might have thought, Yachal afilu nitrach b'soch lamed yom. You might have thought that even if the baby died within 30 days, maybe halacha l'maisa still, there should be a pidyon aben. Talmud lomar ach chilek. Therefore, I will say the Torah uses the word ach, and ach always comes to distinguish between things, right? Ach always comes to make a chilek. So ach says that there are times for a pidyon, and there aren't times for a pidyon. When will there be times for a pidyon? A firstborn baby boy who lives past 30 days. When is there no pidyon? If the baby dies within 30 days. Okay, behema gasa. Again, I will say, like I said, random halachas, all just stated by Ula. Behema gasa, niknis b'mashicha. Remember again, we saw this actually in our Kiddushin days as well. A behema gasa. Behema gasa is a large animal. A large animal is acquired by mashicha. What's mashicha? Mashicha is causing the animal to move. Either again, you pulling it, or korolovi, calling the animal when it comes to you, hitting it with a stick and causing it to move. That's mashicha. But 1 second, we learned that a behema gasa, a large animal, is acquired through mesira. Rabbi said, remember again, what's mesira? So mesira, remember, is either handing over of the reins or taking hold of the mane of the animal. Ula holds like the following. Tana Bisanya, the Chacham say Zuv Mashicha. The Chacham say both a behema gasa and a behema daka. Both a large animal and a small animal are acquired by Mashicha. Rabbi Shimon Omer Zu v'Zu b'Hagba. No, both a behema gasa and a behema daka are acquired with Hagba. But remember we had this again. So behema daka, I understand how you could do Hagba with a behema daka, small animal. But say, how do you do Hagba with a large animal? Remember this? So Rashi points out over here. Rashi says very simple. What do? you put utensils underneath the animal and you have the animal step up on the utensils. Having the animal step up is also called hagbah. I'm causing the animal to be lifted. I'm not lifting the animal myself, but lamaisa, I'm causing the animal to be lifted. That's hagbah. Okay. Va'amra ula. Let's go back to Ula says, another interesting case. Amar Balazar, ha'achin shechelku. So let's listen to this case. Brothers are dividing up an estate. It's an inheritance case. So mashaleh and shalom. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, brothers are dividing up an estate. Good. So I'll say, so now, if they have clothing, let's say the brothers themselves are wearing clothing that was purchased from the estate, by the funds of the estate, that clothing is factored in as part of the property division. So that's what it means. So masha alehan shaman, what they're wearing is valuated, is appraised, and goes as part of the property division. Umasha al b'nei u'menosein in shaman. What their children are wearing, are not considered part of the property division. Now look at Rashi. Rashi masha al b'nei v'abenosein in shaman. Decheven de banim u'barnos lo asu lebeidina lo mevazina le'lemesi. So we'll say, since it's not common for children to go to Beis Din, right? It would be embarrassing to pull the children into Beis Din, to start evaluating their clothing. So therefore, whatever the kids are wearing is not part of the property settlement. So also, it's an interesting halacha. So whatever the brothers themselves are wearing, that is part of the property settlement. Whatever the kids are wearing is not part of the property settlement. Amra Papa. So pamim av mashalein in shaman. We'll say sometimes even what the brothers themselves are wearing is not part of the property settlement. Like for example, mashkachas la begadol achi. We'll say the example is with the oldest brother. We'll say whatever the older brother is wearing is not considered part of the property settlement. Why? So we'll say it's interesting. The older brother was kind of like the one who was in charge of things. So I will say, so because of that, and that might also mean that he might be negotiating with other vendors or sellers or things like that, it's in the best interest of the family that big brother look good. We want big brother to look good. Why? He's got to represent the family. He's got to enter into negotiations. So in general, the family is good if big brother is clothed through the estate, because again, it's in the best interest of the estate. So interestingly enough, I will say, that'll be a case of where the oldest brother's clothing is not factored in as part of estate settlement, since again, having him well clothed is in the interest of the estate. Very interesting. See, he's in charge of the business dealings of the estate. So because he's in charge of the business dealings, we want him to look good. So therefore, again, his wardrobe is a function of running the estate, and therefore, when there is an estate division, his wardrobe is not factored in as part of, is not counted as something that he received, so to speak, from the estate. Very interesting. V'amrula. Well, say it's also fascinating to see how there's no question that how we dress and how we present has an impact on how we are heard. Right? So if you look at the lashon over here, it's the benefit of the estate that he dresses well. That his words should be heard. But say, isn't that incredible? His words should be heard. So there's a kind of, we know this. We know this. So we'll say that again. That halacha l'maaseh. This is why. Why is there big day kahuna? Right? Why does the kohen go down to a specific uniform? Why an exquisite uniform? Why do the kohanim dress a certain way? Because we'll say how we dress and how we present is the first way in which the world perceives us. We know this. You see someone dressed in a nice bakavadik way, by definition, it's true, it's a bit superficial, but you judge them in a certain way. You see someone dressed like a shlump, right? And just, again, that you assume that's reflective of who and what they are. This is why there's an obligation to dress a certain way for davening, right? Because again, how we dress, how we come to daven, ultimately is reflective about how we feel about the experience. Same way again, you come to a meeting, how I dress is reflective of how I treat this particular endeavor. It's not just people think that clothing is just such a superficial. It's not true. How we present, or how we present speaks volumes about how we measure the importance of the particular initiative that we are engaging in. Incredible yisod. We'll say another interesting case. Right, listen, imagine the following situation. I give Ruvain something to watch. Right, so Ruvain is a shomer. I give him over something. He's watching my ox. Let's just keep it easy. He's watching my ox. And then what happens? Reuven gives it over to Shimon. Now I will say, Reuven gives it over to Shimon without my knowledge or permission. That's shomer shmas l'shomer. Pater. So I will say, so now what happens? And now what happens when the ox is with Shimon, the second shomer? What happens? It's killed. An ones, right? Even an ones situation, right? So what's the halacha? So Reuven, the first shomer, is pater. Reuven, the first shomer, is pater, right? We'll say, so essentially, now what's the logic behind that? Look at Rashi. Shomer shmas l'shomer pater. Harishon b'chol osen dinim. Shahayu pater. Im haisa etzlo pater nami hashta avlar minu pshiyai. Shemasali ishach. You're supposed to listen to this. It's actually fascinating. So when Reuven, the shomer number 1, gives over to Shimon, shomer number 2, something happens to, let's say again, there's an ones, an accessory that happens to the animal with Shimon. Reuven, shomer number 1 is pater. I was supposed to say, whatever Reuven, shomer number 1, would have been pater for, had the animal been in his domain, he's going to be pater. If a similar event happens while in the domain of shomer number 2, Shimon. What's the logic? Since Reuven gave it over to a bardas, Reuven gave it over to a perfectly capable individual, therefore halacha l'maisa, there is no heightened liability for Reuven. And as it goes without saying, if Reuven was an unpaid custodian and he gives it to Shimon as a shomer sachar, of course again Reuven is going to be pater. Why? Because obviously again he's giving it over to a heightened level of shmirah. Even Rabbi say, if Reuven was the shomer sachar and he gave it over to Shimon was the shomer chinam, the hashta gerue gari l'shmirasa. Now there's a lower level of liability or responsibility. Nami pater shahari masr lebendas. We'll say, as long as Reuven shomer number 1 gave it over to a guy who is a capable individual, Reuven's pater. Incredible halacha. Now one second. Not everybody agrees with this. Rava Aber, absolutely not. Shomer shemas l'shomer chayiv. No, absolutely not. Let's say, if I entrust Reuven with something, and then Reuven unilaterally decides to give it over to another shomer, something happens in the hands of the shomer, Reuven's chayiv. Reuven's chayiv. V'lomi ba'i shomer sachar shemas l'shomer chinam. And I would say, not just talking about a case where Reuven was a shomer sachar, and he gives it over to Shimon as a shomer chinam. The Gemara says, Digarui gari l'shmirah. So there's a lower level of responsibility. And lafilu shomer chinam shemas l'shomer sachar. Even if Reuven was a shomer chinam, and he gives it over to Shimon as a shomer sachar, chayiv. Reuven is going to be chayiv for anything that happens to that shar. Why? Because I, the principal, can say to Reuven, the Amalei, at mehemenes li b'shvua, haylo mehemen li b'shvua. Listen, we'll say, how does shomer work? I give over something to Reuven. Something happens to the animal. What happens? Reuven takes an oath. He swears, I promise I was not negligent. So I can say, Reuven, I gave the object because I trust you. And if you take a shvuah to me, I trust, okay, you didn't do anything. I don't know Shimon. I don't trust Shimon. I don't hold of Shimon. I have nothing to do with Shimon. So who brought Shimon into this? And I will say, by the way, that's how we paskin. We pass like Rava, shomer shemas l'shomer chayiv. If you decide to assign your agency without the knowledge or consent of the principal, you, the first appointed shomer, bear full responsibility. One more halacha. Amar ula, amar balazar, hilchusa, kovin min ha'avadim. So we'll say a very interesting case here. So halacha l'maisa, if I go ahead and I owe someone money, right? So let's say I owe Reuven $10,000. And now again, I don't have cash to repay it. Reuven could collect from my avadim. He could collect ultimately again from my Eved Kinani. Take my Eved Kinani's payment. This is true. I'm sorry, it's a question. Is this true even from orphans? Right? Rashi says, Imes lova, v'naflu kameyasmi, mi amra belazar, the bal chov gova bin avodim, kidim mekarkoi dami. So we'll say, so listen to this. So is this true even if, let's say, the creditor died? The borrower died. He left buying Yisomim. So can now the creditor come and collect the evid from the Yisomim? So Gemara says, lo, minei. No, it's not true only from the creditor himself. Minei, from the creditor himself, if you don't mean galima, dal kasvei. They both say from the creditor himself you could collect anything. Right? From the creditor himself you could even collect the shirt off his back. In other words, everything is encumbered. So what's the chiddush of saying that you can go ahead and collect an eved? Hacham asking, what's the case over here? Shaso apotiki. Let's say the case over here is where you made the eved an apotiki. We'll say, what's an apotiki? Apotiki is where I borrow money from someone. I'm a creditor. I'm a debtor. Sorry. And now I say to the creditor, this is where you're going to collect from. I identify a specific source of collection. If I made my Eved an apotiki, the specified source of repayment, and then I subsequently sold the Eved, ultimately, again, the creditor could go and collect that Eved from the purchaser. I will say that we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Eretz Hashem tomorrow with this Gemara. Again, incredible, interesting case about how to go ahead and use the Eved. I will say, I just want to point out, if these cases seem random and unrelated, it is because they are random and unrelated. All common denominator amongst all of them is all statements of Ula. I will say, Shemend Shkaya.